It's Vikings week. It's hate week. Vikings Packers round 2 at Lambeau Field. This is Pulse of the Pack. Kyle, hit it.
This is Pulse of the Pack.
There's Bledsoe. Down he goes. And there's Reggie White. And that's that hump move. Reggie's coming again. And Reggie White. Reggie White's going to take over this game right now.
Begins the count. Takes the snap. He has the quarterback. He's into the touchdown of the Packers are all in front. 20-17. And 13 seconds showing on the clock. And the Green Bay Packers are going to be world champions, NFL champions for the third straight year.
Barr lays it up for Freeman, and it's incomplete. Or did he make the catch at the 15? What are they going to rule it? He caught it? Touchdown! He did what?
He did exactly what the Green Bay Packers are going to do this weekend, and that is beat the Minnesota Vikings. Spoiler alert for the pick show, segment of the show later in the day. This is Pulse of the Pack, everybody. Welcome to Hate Week. The Minnesota Vikings infiltrate Lambeau Field this weekend. My son, Rashawn Gary, is hanging out over the left shoulder of Jason Perone. And behind his giant dome is Jair Alexander. And as you can see, they've sacked Kirk Cousins for a safety on this particular play. Thank you guys for joining us. It's a lot of fun, as always, this week. It's Vikings week. What else is there to say? So I'm your host of the show today. I am Jacob Westendorf in the Game On Wisconsin studios. You can follow me on Twitter. I am at Jacob Westendorf. And I am joined, as always, by Jason Perone. Jason, how's it going?
It's going very well. That was just a very realistic intro. You've had done some great poetry and great poems, and you're creating a very high bar for yourself. So we'll have to make up for it in show, I guess. I'm doing well.
Yeah, it's Halloween, so maybe I'm on a sugar high, which, by the way, if you guys haven't seen, check out at GameOnWI on Twitter and just use hashtag trick or treat, and you'll get a couple of sweet treats headed your way. Shout out to our guy, Drew, one of our graphics guys, him, and Titletown Rain, of course, Jared, have been cooking up some stuff that's been really cool for us the last couple of days and specifically came to fruition today. So that's been pretty cool, but check it out over there. Again, at GameOnWI, hashtag trick or treat, and you'll find a sweet treat for you in there. And we're kind of doing that at random. So that's been fun. Jason, it's Vikings week. The Packers are coming off of a 35-20 win over the Houston Texans, a bit of a bounce back game. And we talked about it on the round table. It was, in my opinion, the more distance we've gotten from that game, the best the defense has played all season. And I say that taking into account the opponent, the level of health, all that kind of stuff as well, because Atlanta, for example, they gave up fewer points, but Julio Jones was hobbled. That Falcons team is a defeated team. They were waiting out on their head coach getting fired. This Texans team, their head coach has already been fired. They played hard for Romeo Crennel. They had just taken the Titans to the brink, and that offense with Brandon Cooks and Randall Cobb and Will Fuller, of course, which a lot of Packers fans have been in the news, and we'll get to that here in just a minute, they have a lot of good weapons. And, of course, all-world quarterback Deshaun Watson, who, if you're making a list of top 5, definitely top 10, but maybe top 5 quarterbacks, you can't do that without including his name on it. So they do all that, and they have 20 points they gave up, and really it could have been less than that if the offense didn't put them into some poor positions. Special teams put them into some poor positions. It was nice to see a bounce back specifically from the defense.
Yeah, it was. And it's Houston, and I don't want to take away the fact that they beat a good team. Well, I shouldn't say a good team this year, but a big road win. And you've got another opponent this week that's had their struggles this season. But yeah, I like the depth. The linebacker, Will Redmond, some of the things that we talked about there, just role players stepping up. Henry Black coming in, making a big play at the end of the game, causing a fumble. These are the kind of things that help make championship teams. The Packers have not always had this in the past. And all of a sudden, Jake, I don't know if this was on our agenda or not, but all of a sudden, the inside linebacker position is absolutely not a weakness, and could actually end up being one of the stronger parts of the defense by the end of the season if the arrow continues going the way it's going.
That it could, and it's been interesting to watch the trajectory of that position, because you want to see what does that look like with everything? Christian Kirksey has not been designated to he's been designated to return, but he hasn't been activated from injured reserve as of yet. As we said, it's 4:05 here, Central Standard Time on Halloween afternoon, I guess. And it's the night before the game. They would have to activate him in order for him to play tomorrow. But you wonder, does he just step right back into the starting lineup? Obviously, he was the green dot on the defense through his first couple games of the season before he got injured. Chris Barnes has been handling those duties for the last couple of weeks. And Kamal Martin, it was only 20 plus snaps, but he was really impressive in terms of playing the run. The question they have is, obviously, do they have somebody who can play in coverage in the middle of the field? Because that's something that the Packers outside corners last week gave up a total of 26 yards when they were the next closest defenders. So Jair Alexander and Josh Jackson. And we'll get to some of that situation here in just a little bit. But before we do that, anything like that, we do have a special guest joining us, and he's wearing green and yellow.
Yeah, how interesting. Or green at least.
Just
my
green.
goodness.
Just green.
Okay, I was going to say,
Halloween.
I knew
We got a Halloween party, so it's Mario themed. And I figured the L is fitting for the Vikings guest coming.
I was going to make the joke, but I mean, hey, you did it on your own. So, ladies and gentlemen, Eric Thompson, OG friend of the show. He's been coming on for the last several years. I don't remember the first actual season that you came in, but doing stuff over at the Daily Norseman and covering the Vikings for you over there. And he's a good sport, if nothing else. So he's come on here when the Vikings have been better than the Packers. I know that hasn't been all that often, but he did come on here in the what year was the Minneapolis Miracle? Was that 2017?
17.
Yep.
Okay. So he came on here 2017 after the most depressing Christmas Eve game that I have ever seen. It was depressing on our end, at least. And it was like the Vikings. I don't know. I mean, Eric, from what you remember from that game, it was almost like the Vikings just kind of showed up and went, and they won. Like, cool. They won that way. So you were in the house for the Minneapolis Miracle too, weren't you?
No, I was not in the house. I actually was watching at a friend's house, and I was on the road already home when the Minneapolis Miracle happened. I left during after the Saints kicked the field goal. I'm like, we had our family there. I'm like, I don't want to flip out in front of my friends and family. And of course, I get the call half a block down the road. I
was going to say, does your phone, when that happens, does your phone blow up like mine does all of a sudden, where you're getting a button, you don't know whether it's good or bad?
Right, exactly. Because I had the radio off and everything. I'm like, it snowed quite a bit in the Twin Cities that night, so I was like, I was going to go home and angrily shovel for a while. And all of a sudden my phone starts blowing up. And, no, really turn on the radio. And I hear Paul Allen absolutely going crazy. So, it's just been nothing but rosy for the Vikings since, right?
Well, yeah, I was going to say, how sure are you after that they are going to Philadelphia winning and hosting the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I mean, despite decades of evidence to the contrary, they just kind of seemed like, all right, that was the Vikings year. This is absolutely going to happen. And it seemed like at the first drive in Philadelphia, they scored up when Kyle Rudolph had the touchdown, and then it was all downhill from there. So, I just want to see what, I hear the generation before me talk about all the Vikings Super Bowl losses. I'd like to check one out for myself.
Kudos, because I remember right after the Minneapolis Miracle, I was sitting in my house, and of course, I make no bones about it, I'm not rooting for Minnesota. And that year I was going to be in Minneapolis for the Super Bowl. So I did not want to see a Vikings and Patriots Super Bowl, a situation where me personally, I don't really have a winner in that scenario. I don't really want the Patriots to win, but I don't want the Vikings to win that either. And after that, I said, yep, I'm with you. The Vikings are the team of destiny. That defense was the best defense in the NFL that season. They're going to eat Nick Foles alive. And they didn't. And I still, to this day, don't fully understand what happened that night and how that happened that night. But like you said, it's kind of been all rosy for the Vikings since then. The following year, of course, they bring in Kirk Cousins, and they do not make the playoffs, and they kind of lose out on everything to Chicago. They had a chance to make the playoffs, if memory serves, if they had just beaten Chicago the last game of the regular season. They end up losing that one to pretty much Chicago's backups, I believe.
Yep, that was the Bears. I think their seeding was completely wrapped up because I think they had the third seed no matter what. Mm-hmm. And if the Vikings had won, I think they would have played they would have gone to Soldier Field. I thought it was silly by the Bears to even try in that game, just because that they posed a lot less of a threat, I thought, to the Bears that season than the the Eagles did, and of course that came to fruition because that was the double doink game, wasn't
That
it?
would be the double
Yeah.
doink. Yep. Nicky Foles leads a drive down at the end, and Cody Parkey obviously lives in infamy now in Chicago. And then the following year, this past year, obviously Minnesota gets to the playoffs. They do win a playoff game. And actually, I don't ever root for the Vikings. However, watching them beat New Orleans was quite funny. And listening to Saints fans cry about officials on a push-up, and listening to Saints fans specifically cry about officials against the Vikings.
Right. In the playoffs, no less.
In the
yes.
playoffs, considering what had happened 10 years prior, is never going to not be funny to me. And the Saints have quickly grown on the list of teams that I absolutely do not like. So it was kind of funny to watch them be the team that Kirk Cousins gets that monkey off of his back against. But this year, not so much. The Vikings came into the season, some turnover, actually quite a bit of turnover on defense. I'm not going to pretend like there wasn't a lot there. They replaced their entire starting cornerback room and some of their group up front. Big free agent signing Michael Pierce isn't around. And it hasn't been pretty on that side of the ball, obviously. Mike Zimmer gets an extension. Rick Spielman gets an extension. They trade for Yannick Ngakoue. He's now a Baltimore Raven. I think the question on everybody's mind going through here is Minnesota currently has one win through this point of the season. What are the chances that Mike Zimmer is actually coaching for his job? Would they give him an extension and then let him go if they finish 3-13?
Yeah, that's really the big question. It seems like Rick Spielman's job is pretty secure because I don't think you make the move like the trade for Ngakoue without ownership backing. And it seems like they're kind of rebuilding for next year because this season's pretty much at 1-5. The playoffs are quite a long shot, especially with a couple of the games they have coming up on the schedule. Yeah, it's Zimmer's. It's going to be really interesting to see if the Vikings do lose a few more games here. If they do finish that 4-12, 3-13, if he's secure, it'd be hard. Of course, it's just the owner's money when you're coming to coach's salary. Of course, he did get the extension, but it's not like it counts against the salary cap or anything. So if the Wilfs really do want to move on, if there is a candidate that's the one thing. And Zimmer is definitely not without his faults. He's kind of, for lack of a better term, he's just kind of stuck in his ways he's gone through a lot of offensive coordinators.
Sounds familiar.
Well, there's the guy in Dallas that you guys might be familiar with. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see. I definitely I don't think that it's a sure thing, even if the Vikings do struggle down the stretch, that he's gone. But if the losses keep on piling up, I know there's a lot of sentiment among Vikings fans and on the commenters on our sites. I think they've kind of seen enough of Zimmer. Personally, I think this is just it was kind of always going to be a rebuild. I don't think it was going to be this bad of a rebuild, but it'll be interesting to see how this team comes out of the bye. Because if they get the doors blown off again by Green Bay, it harkens back. I mean, this season feels so much like the 2013 season for the Vikings when, like Leslie Frazier was kind of the defense was just not there, and there's a similarity with the 2010 season too. It was a home blowout against the Packers that year that sent Brad Childress packing. So it'll be interesting to see. I don't expect him to get fired this week by any means, but if it's getting worse, it'll be interesting to see what ownership does.
So as far as the players go, right? Because there's been talk about Harrison Smith potentially being on the market. Ngakoue got traded away. So let's just kind of fast forward a little bit here and assume that the trajectory stays similar and they do go into that rebuild mode. Are there any other discussions or any other big pieces that would raise some eyebrows that you think could be moves that the team makes? And that would even include Kirk Cousins in that too. I don't know how attached they are to him and what your thoughts are on what they might do with Kirk Cousins if they end up finishing sub 500 and it just goes in that direction.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I think the most logical next piece, I think, for me would be left tackle Riley Reif, just because he restructured his deal. They drafted Ezra Cleveland to maybe be his replacement this year. They tried him out at right guard. I thought that was it's not a great decision, but they're kind of throwing whatever they can against the wall at guard. I think Riley Reif would make, he's been a very serviceable left tackle. He's been an above average starter his entire time here. Really good at pass blocking this year. He's had a really nice season. And if they want to see, if winning isn't the highest priority, especially down the stretch here, they got to see what they have for the pieces, because they still need 2-3 pieces on the offensive line. I feel like I've been saying this for 5-6 years now, but they're going to need to see what they have there. Harrison Smith would be an interesting one. I think you could fetch quite a bit for him, but he is kind of the heart and soul of that defense. He lets if I can't imagine what this defense would be like without him. It'd be really scary, because he can patch up a lot of the stuff. But again, he's in his early 30s now, and his value probably isn't going to go up in future seasons. So if they are really in rebuild mode, that would be a possibility. I think the other safety, Anthony Harris, would probably make the most sense, just because he's on the franchise tag. They're not sure. It'd be a surprise to me for the team to pay both safeties that much money, especially with so many holes on the rest of the defense. So, but again, there's always been rumors of the last couple of years of Kyle Rudolph. I know he wants to stay in Minnesota. He's really built a lot with his philanthropy in Minnesota, but that would be an interesting piece, especially with the team drafting Irv Smith last year, kind of as his replacement. There are a couple tight end needy teams, and Rudolph was still really dangerous in the red zone. So that would be interesting. But yeah, I mean, at this rate, just about everyone I think would probably be on the table. I'd personally love to see a Kirk Cousins trade, but I don't know what team is approaching that contract, especially after the extension that he signed in the offseason as well.
Yeah, and that was kind of the story, right? Is after the Ngakoue trade, they had asked Spielman if he could commit to a rebuild, and he basically said no. For lack of better phrasing, was like he kind of pointed to the Dalvin Cook extension, and then all of us kind of looked at, well, you also have this quarterback under contract for the next 2 seasons for a pretty large portion of the salary cap. And I'm not 100% sure of the dead cap hit on Cousins, but he's at least probably the quarterback for next season, even if they finish 3-13 and are in position to take Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Trey Lance, your guy over at North Dakota State, somebody like that. Even if they're in position to do that, you probably are in a situation which maybe that's not so bad. Mm-hmm. Where if they're taking that quarterback, they have a year to sit behind Kirk, or maybe it turns into a situation where if Kirk's not good and they let that guy start after they start, 1-5 or something like that again, if that were the case. But one thing to defend Mike Zimmer, because I know it's popular to blame the coach, and I tend to get a reputation as an apologist for the coaches, and that goes for Mike McCarthy and Matt LaFleur to some degree, and Jim Harbaugh over at Michigan. And I'll do it now for Mike Zimmer, because what the hell? They have the best third down defense in the NFL, and that is with no pass rush and no cornerbacks. Mm-hmm. From a scheme standpoint, Mike Zimmer's still pretty sound. It's just, there's nobody there. They just, mm-hmm. I mean, I'm telling you right now, I had to look at our lads before we started here, because I have no idea who's rushing the passer for the Vikings. Like, that's where we're at. And cornerback wise, they signed a guy off the practice squad, and he might be covering Devontae Adams tomorrow. It's just not a great situation from an injury standpoint and a personnel standpoint in general for this team right now. That brings me to, and we'll do one more behind the scenes thing before we get into the actual game. The Dalvin Cook extension is because the Packers are kind of in a same spot with Aaron, or a similar spot, I should say, with Aaron Jones. The difference being that the Packers typically haven't identified themselves as a running team that way, the way the Vikings have. What were your thoughts on that extension when it was signed, and what's it look like now? Obviously 6 games into it, he's great.
Right. It's always hard. It's all the analytics and numbers, you can't really justify that kind of an extension to a running back, just because it's just such an undervalued position these days. That said, Dalvin Cook is great, and I couldn't imagine what this offense would look like without him. It looked pretty bad without him when and against the Falcons, against a pretty bad defense. What Alexander Madison was, I'm sure he was the biggest waiver wire pickup in fantasy football, and they ended up, I think, with 6 carries for 26 yards because the game got away from him. But again, I can't justify that much. It wasn't a breaking the bank kind of extension, at least. It wasn't an Ezekiel Elliott kind of contract. And with his injury history, and he's already been banged up again this year, it was risky. And overall, it's probably not a great move. But the fan in me really appreciates the move, because then you're kind of set at that position going forward. Again, if he stays healthy, and that's kind of been the big question mark. And like you touched on with the on the other side of the ball with the cornerbacks. And now Mike Hughes is going on injured reserve. Sounds like he's going to be out for the year. That means out of his first 50 possible games, he's going to miss 26 of them. Mm-hmm. And they just don't have the guys there. And of course, Cam Dantzler, he's had some rookie struggles. Jeff Gladney. There've been nice plays, but you can't rely on two rookie corners to be your guys. And with the turnover they've had, it's really going to be, that is, and I'm kind of in between on the Mike Zimmer apologist too. I personally don't think getting rid of him is going to solve a whole lot, especially if you don't have a candidate to replace him. But yeah, it's overall with the Cook extension, it's okay, especially for what the Vikings do on offense. But it was probably too much to pay just because that's where the NFL is with running backs.
They've had so many injuries this year that it's kind of hard to muster up a lot of questions about the promise and what this year is going to be. I know that the sites have started moving into next year and beyond. I mean, you never know what could happen here. And then don't forget, we've got the Lions in the division, so there's always at least that you can lean on to prop you up a little bit. But as far as looking ahead, because I know we're going to talk about tomorrow's game in a second, but as far as looking ahead now, where would you? I mean, if you're Rick Spielman, where are you going there? Is it offensive line? You've got Justin Jefferson. Are you adding another weapon there on offense because Stephon Diggs isn't there, and he was such a big piece of that offense? You've got Irv Smith. You've got your tight end. You've got your running back. I mean, offensively, you've got a lot of pieces there. Or is it the low-hanging fruit and the obvious where it's like, okay, we need a corner. We need a solid corner, and obviously health is a big piece of it. But where are you seeing the biggest opportunities for this team to develop? And if we look at 2021, are you looking at a team that could very easily be back in the equation next year?
Yeah, I mean, there's still a couple pieces away, I think, on both sides of the ball. Yeah, with the skill positions on offense, they have a really good 1-2 punch in Thielen and Jefferson. Jefferson's been everything as advertised and more this season. He's been kind of the only silver lining in an otherwise pretty dark season. But so I think they're okay there, but it starts in both trenches now. I mean, getting Michael Pierce next season after he opted out is going to be huge, because that's kind of why they let Linval Joseph go, is because they knew they could have another piece there. But yeah, now that I believe Jalen Holmes is the other starting defensive end now that Ngakwe's gone, and Ifeadi Odenigbo has had a pretty good season. I think he leads the team in pressures this season. He's
Aaron's showing off his absolutely fantastic grammatical skills there. He just rolled right off the tongue.
That one took a lot of practice, but he's such a fun interview at training camp. So he was his rookie year. I had a one-on-one with him. So the Odenigbo, that it's easy for Vikings fans after the first 20-25 times. But yeah, but other than that, I mean, it's really slim pickings. I mean, Shamar Stephen has been fine in the middle, and they're just kind of rotating people in and out. They just don't have the players right now. And Anthony Barr is up and down as he can be, especially in pass defense. He's a really big part of the defense. It's out, and it's everything. So and that the Ngakwe trade, people were just like, well, my gosh, I can't believe they basically dropped 50 draft picks for 6 weeks of Ngakwe. I get the trade. I was a really big fan of the trade, because if you were assuming that Danielle Hunter was coming back, and that's a really good 1-2 punch especially to help out your young corners. And they knew they were going to have to struggle a little bit in the secondary. So getting pressure on the quarterback was going to be a big part of that. But yeah, now they just don't have it.
Yeah, they don't. And I mean, you're talking about that as, looking ahead. The easy thing to point at is Justin Fields, Trey Lance, Trevor Lawrence. If they get that, I mean, if they get number one, that's easy. You can just, whoever falls at number one, we'll just pencil that one in, even if it's a team that picked a quarterback a year ago.
Right.
I mean, they'll take Trevor Lawrence, and then they'll figure out the rest later. Maybe the Giants, because Dave Gettleman is Dave Gettleman, but that's the only team I can picture doing something like that. Let's look at tomorrow's game, obviously, because the Vikings come in. This is kind of their, I don't want to call it their last ditch or something like that, but if they're going to make something out of this season, it really does have to start tomorrow. They're off the bye. They're playing a team that they kind of open their season with. It's kind of like they can look at it. Mike Zimmer can kind of sell this as we're starting over, and we're starting over with a chance against the team that kind of put our season into the bit of the tailspin we started with at the beginning of the year, but we're playing now, and we have a chance to kind of put a dent in their record, pick up 2 games, if you will, 1 loss for them, 1 win for us, and kind of start on a roll from there. What I'm trying to figure out is where is that path to victory for Minnesota? Because when you look at it as the team that is the underdog, you try and figure out a way that, if this goes right and that goes right, they can upset them. Can they get it to where it's a defensive struggle or something like that? My thought is if it's a defensive struggle, Minnesota may not have enough of the playmakers on that side of the ball to make enough plays. If it's a shootout, then it's kind of comparing quarterbacks, right? Then it's Kirk Cousins against Aaron Rodgers at Lambeau Field. And now you're getting into some trouble there. So talk me into a way that Minnesota pull out the biggest fan card you can. How are you going to talk yourself into the Vikings winning tomorrow at 12 o'clock Central Time?
Without any help of beer or anything else like that? I think that's the only way I could really, truly be convinced. This is it's hard. It really is. Just looking at this game, looking at the matchups, the first thing is they'd have to almost flip the time of possession from week 1 because the Vikings were barely on the field, especially in that first half. I think they had the ball for 7 minutes or something in the first half. And they just couldn't get off the field. They kept on allowing Rodgers and the Packers just to kind of march up and down the field. They were pretty good in the red zone. They stopped. That game could have got even more out of hand in the first half than it was. But I think they just have to capitalize on their possessions. Hope they get kind of lucky with. I mean, it's weird to even hope for turnovers from Aaron Rodgers, especially against the Vikings. I mean, I'd have to look it up, but I mean, his turnovers per game, it's got to be
Ever since Jared Allen left, I mean, it seemed like Jared Allen was a dude. He'd have a strip sack and he intercepted a pass against Rodgers in a game before. I mean, so that's it.
But yeah, it feels like it's been years since he's even thrown an interception against the Vikings. So it'll be, I think probably the last one that I can remember was the first game at US Bank. Maybe
Waynes,
yeah. But it'll have to be the ball control. They'll have to basically. I just don't see how they're going to stop that. I joked in a Q&A with another Packer site this week that the only way that Adams is going to get stopped is if he slips on his own drool match at the matchups lining up across from him, because I just don't see how they're. I mean, they did not do it. What he have 17 targets and 14 catches for over 150 the first game, and now the secondary. And it looks like Dantzler might be back. He just got activated from the COVID reserve list this afternoon. I guess it was just contact tracing. He didn't actually have it, so he might play. But I mean, Mike Hughes played over 50 snaps that game, and so if he's going to be gone, the secondary is worse than the first time, and they got absolutely scorched. I mean, the Packers had over 500 yards, so they just have to keep the defense off the field. They're going to have to convert. They're going to, and when the Packers do, there's not going to be a shutout by any means, but they'll have to maybe bow up in the red zone again for some Mason Crosby field goals, because that's the only way they're going to hang with them. Because if it just goes shootout, if both teams are going back and forth, you always have to like Green Bay's chances, especially at Lambeau, especially with Rodgers playing the way he is for every game except for that Tampa game. I mean, he's really kind of had a big comeback here. So even though everyone kind of picked on the Jordan Love selection, maybe that was just that. Maybe he should be the MVP just because he made Rodgers so mad, and he's playing so great this season.
How much do you hate him? I know you've mentioned the Vikings fans that I talk to. I think it's funny. There's you and there's Ivan Carter, and they always talk about that smile. And it personally makes me love that smile that he has even more. And everybody knows what I'm talking about. But when he has that expletive eating grin, I believe is what you refer to it as. Yeah. Just how much do you hate that he was kind of declining, or there was at least that discussion that he was declining, and now all of a sudden he's an MVP candidate again?
Yeah, I mean, it was me and Ben Baldwin from The Athletic. He was my favorite follow on Twitter last season, because he got all the analytics stuff of how Rodgers is throwing everything away and he wasn't as good and everything. But yeah, now it's just hard to. And and who was it? Nick Swartzen. I think he had something in one of his stand-up shows. He's like, he had the opportunity to meet Aaron Rodgers. He's a huge Vikings fan. He's Minnesotan. And he had an opportunity to meet Rodgers one time, and he said no because he's like, I'll probably end up liking him, and then I'll screw it up. So it's the same thing for me. Like Vikings fans, if they look into their heart, if Rodgers was on the Vikings, he'd be everyone's favorite player. Like he's with even all that smugness that we all hate, that the purple crush and all the little slide
Oh, come on.
slide
That's
jokes
not.
and I mean, like stuff like that. Like it's we would love. I love when guys talk trash. Like I grew up a Gary Payton fan, so I love it. It just happens to be against my favorite team and for my least favorite team. And so and again, it's been 30 straight years of Hall of Fame quarterbacks for you guys, and meanwhile we're paying Kirk Cousins, $100 million to be the 20th best quarterback in the league this year. So it's a little frustrating, but yeah, if we're supposed to hate him, we do hate him, but I also respect him.
Well, I was going to ask you about that before we cut you loose here. I was going to ask you about Rodgers and your thoughts on him. So, but then on the other side of the ball, Jair Alexander as an up-and-coming corner, and quarterbacks are starting to shy away from him. I know it's kind of hyperbole to say it because the Legion of Boom was so good at the peak of their power, but it's almost like Jair's creating that Richard Sherman effect where quarterbacks and offenses are just choosing not to focus on that side of the field. But then you've got Adam Thielen, who I think has had some pretty good success against Jair for as good as Jair is. But from an opponent's perspective there, do you see it the same way? Do you see Jair as an up-and-comer and a guy who's really kind of warranted some of the hype that he got?
Yeah, I mean, he has really taken that step, I think, this season, and he showed a lot of potential his rookie year. But he's really that teams are starting to not pass his way. So it'll be interesting to see who Alexander covers actually on Sunday now, because week one, the first 2 weeks of the season, Jefferson really wasn't utilized very much, and he played mostly in the slot. Now, since the week 2 game, Jefferson's played on the outside over 80% of his snaps. So he's, they're lining him up all over the place. It'll be interesting to see who the Packers kind of, I wouldn't say respect more, but just maybe because of Thielen's previous success against Alexander and the fact that maybe they just want to make the Vikings a little more one-dimensional, you might see Alexander on Jefferson. And so that's kind of that's the one. It's because I think Kevin King's out as well now, isn't
Correct.
he?
Yep.
So if the Vikings do have a little bit of an advantage there, it'll be whoever Alexander kind of isn't covering. That other wide receiver might be able to get open a bunch tomorrow. But yeah, I would kill for a couple of Jair Alexanders right now on the Vikings roster. He's been pretty impressive, and again, I say that with the utmost disrespect and underneath, but he's been pretty good. But again, Thielen has been the one wide receiver that has had pretty consistent success. I just hope it comes when the game isn't the Packers aren't up by 20 and they're playing kind of the prevent defense in the third and fourth quarter, because that seems to be when Cousins puts up his best numbers this season,
or most seasons.
All
That's
of them
going all the way back to Washington.
Well, I know. All those Washington fans that filled up my Twitter feed when the Vikings got him, and I mean, they were right. We're getting the Kirk Cousins experience. And again, he'll have a few games, I'm sure, even this season, that he'll perform well. Hopefully Sunday is one of them, because if the Vikings are going to win just a handful more, maybe 2-3 more games this season, you'd always want it to be against a division rival.
Yeah, and he's had a few of those experiences against Green Bay where it's like he's had a few games that were like, okay, Kirk, like this year, week 1, for example, light it up in garbage time. But he's had some other games where he's been legitimately awesome. The Clay Matthews roughing the passer game, for example, that play notwithstanding, he was actually pretty good in that game.
He was great that game, yep.
He was really good in some other games. So the Kirk Cousins experience, that's a good way to put it. And it's funny because I think it's funny when it happens for the Packers too, because anytime you get a free agent from somewhere or something, the other team's fan base is in your timeline talking about XYZ. Yep. And sometimes they're right and sometimes they're not. And, sometimes it's fun to get that last laugh, but in this case, it appears that you're kind of getting that. So Eric, I know you're out of time. You're getting ready to run here. So the last question I have is, I know this might be a little clouded because one of them ended up wearing purple, but I did mention that you hated Rodgers. Did you hate Favre as well? And if so, which one did you hate more?
Oh, that's an excellent question. I hated both of them so much. It probably Favre, just because that's what I grew up with. Like I was, when Favre came, that was really when my Vikings fandom it was taking off. I was 11 years old then, his first season, and so becoming a super diehard Vikings fan every year, having to go up against Favre. And Favre had a couple clunkers against the Vikings. They got the best of him sometimes, but he was always there. And even when he signed with the Vikings originally, I was like, oh gosh, I don't want that, because it looked like he was pretty washed up, especially after that Jets season. So it's like, oh, it's another classic, retirement home quarterback for the Vikings. But yeah, 2009 was fun. It would have been great to get to the Super Bowl with him, and that has softened the blow a little bit. But yeah, Rodgers is one of those. I have to hate him, obviously, but I do. I think, personally, I think he's probably it might be blasphemous to say for some Packers fans, but I think Rodgers is the better quarterback too.
Oh, I don't think that's blasphemous. I think that's becoming more and more common as we get further away from Favre. But I thought that was interesting. I was going to have the follow-up of, was it strange when he signed in Minnesota? Because I didn't burn my jersey. It's hanging over here, but I came damn close to it. It was a tough go. But that's Eric Thompson. I promised a hard stop at 4:30, and it's 4:35. So he's a good sport. Thanks for sticking around. You can follow him on Twitter. He's at Eric_J_Thompson and the Daily Norseman. If the Packers and Vikings ever meet in the playoffs again, we'll have him back. Otherwise, we look forward to next season. Eric, thanks for coming, and enjoy the game tomorrow, or at least try.
All right. Always a pleasure, guys. Go easy on us tomorrow, right?
I can't promise that, but thanks, Eric.
Thanks, Eric.
All right. Again, that's Eric Thompson of the Daily Norseman. And Jason, we're going to run a little bit here because we're running a little short on time myself. So a lot of interesting stuff there about the Vikings, obviously, guys. The matchups, the deal at this point. Kevin King is not playing tomorrow. The Packers did not activate Alan Lazard or Christian Kirksey, so they will not play tomorrow. Whether or not they do before they play San Francisco, that remains to be seen, because they do play them again on a short week. So, Jason, the next time we talk, we'll actually be wrapping up a 49ers game, and that should be fun, because that's kind of the litmus test, right? Tomorrow, I know it's disrespectful to say something like this, and it's the NFL, and it's an any given Sunday league, and all that cliche bullshit. I know all that. That said, this game to me, it's very simple. Make your layups. It's something I was taught in basketball, is if you make your layups, more often than not, you win your games. And I went to a school where we missed a lot of layups, and we lost a lot of basketball games as a result. And largely, look at it this way. I know that I might look from here like the pinnacle of male athleticism, but I'm really not. And I was a starter on some of my basketball teams.
There's a reason we only see Jake from the shoulders up.
That's correct. And you've never seen me run or anything like that. So I struggled, and the team struggled and all that stuff. But what I'm saying off that is Minnesota is a bad football team. I don't care that they're coming off a bye. They don't match up well with Green Bay anywhere. And Eric kind of alluded to that too. To me, Green Bay would have to step on themselves the entire game and really be looking forward to playing San Francisco on Thursday night, or an injury to the quarterback. Those are really the only ways I see Minnesota winning this game. I tried to figure out a path to victory to Minnesota, and I've tried to do it all week. I told you guys week 1 that I thought Minnesota sucked, and I was right. I've been proven right over the course of time. I think that Justin Jefferson is awesome. I think that Adam Thielen is very good, and Eric kind of mentioned it. He's had plenty of success. Janelle, that's not funny. What is even Jacob supposed to mean? Anyways, what is even me supposed to mean? I think that I can't find a way for Minnesota to win. They don't match up. Like I said, they don't match up well with Green Bay anywhere. And nothing has changed from week 1 to now. Even if David Bakhtiari doesn't play tomorrow, and I think he will, but even if he doesn't, Minnesota doesn't have the pass rushers to take advantage of that. They don't have the cornerbacks to cover up Devontae Adams and the fact that Alan Lazard's not playing tomorrow. They don't stop the run that well. So the fact that Aaron Jones isn't playing tomorrow isn't that big of a deal. Jamal Williams is a good running back in his own right anyway. So I look forward to him having a big day. Again, I should say. And Aaron Rodgers at home. That's as good as it gets. This should be simple. It should be show up, don't play a D- game, and you should win. And I'm not that concerned about the Vikings on that side of the ball. Like he said, I know that they said they do have a matchup advantage. Whoever Jair Alexander's not covering, even as well as I think Josh Jackson has played, especially last week, That's a mismatch for the Vikings, whether it's Jefferson or Thielen against Josh Jackson. Until proven otherwise, that's a mismatch. Okay. The Packers still have more playmakers on the defensive side of the ball. And, oh, yeah, Kirk will throw you one, maybe two. I'd like to see some turnovers and stuff like that. So let's move into that because we did have a question from Big Al. And, Jason, we had this discussion here. I dig that picture, man. You must be an offensive lineman. Kudos. It all starts up front with the Hogs. We had our discussion last week in the Slack channel, and the comment you made was, I'd like to see something that or something along the lines of, I'm paraphrasing, but what's the difference between Josh Jackson and Ahmad Carroll? So explain yourself.
Overreaction, because Josh Jackson missed one tackle and I hated it.
You overreacted? No, that never happens.
I'm actually trying to quit. I really am trying to quit. So
Jason trying to quit overreaction is like a heroin addict trying to quit. Never mind. That's bad.
I could make so many other comparisons right now to some other entity. Okay. So yeah. So it was overreaction right there, Josh. And the other part of it too is that my frustration is based on where he was drafted and what I expected from him. If I knew he wasn't very good from the get-go and I didn't like the pick and I was like, oh, okay, well, I wouldn't be surprised and I'd be like, oh, no shock there. But it's so much more frustrating when you expect somebody to be better. And I think we all got a little hoodwinked after his first preseason. He was, pick six and all the plays he made in preseason, and he just hasn't translated to the defense. But Jake, the one thing I will say here, and this is something that you have to be patient with, and I think is still a work in progress, is the Jerry Gray effect. And that's what we wanted to see was, can he come in and make Josh Jackson a serviceable player to the point where the Packers actually consider bringing him back? Next year is the last year of his rookie deal. Next year is the end of Goot's first draft class's tenure, with the exception of their first round, because they're 5 years. But we're going to start to see.
That one turned out okay, by the way, the first round. I think
it did. Just a little bit. Yeah. It takes away half the field just by his dressing and being out there. And I'm telling you right now, NFL, please allow the yellow sleeves. I just want to see that one game. Those were so phenomenal. But that we're going to see how committed this regime is to that draft and these draft picks. And Josh Jackson, as a second rounder, he's still got to get every opportunity to play that he can. Hasn't looked too bad. If he goes out and he performs well against the likes of Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson, and he does well in coverage and he doesn't give up the big play and some of those things that have kind of snake bit him in the past, you got something going on there. And it's unfortunate, but Eric was talking about the injury factor and on the Viking side of things, and the Packers, Mike Hughes, and we understand that completely. We have a guy named Kevin King who can't seem to stay on the field, and unfortunately, if Josh Jackson's playing well and Kevin King is not playing well and he's missing some of these games, Kevin King's up for a new contract too. It could end up costing him some money, which would be a good problem to have as far as the Packers go. So yeah, I'm hoping he has a decent game. But the one thing that he has that the Vikings don't have is a lot of confidence in his team at this point right now. I don't know how well the Vikings are going to show up and play. I know that's projecting, and there's no reason to suggest that they've given up on this season, but get a get-right game and a big game, and if Josh gets a big pick or a big interception, sometimes that's all it takes to build his confidence and something to build. Look at Montravius Adams. Montravius Adams finally is playing some snaps, and he actually is not bad. So let that be the case. But it all comes from the place of me wanting to see more from Josh Jackson and being frustrated we haven't so far.
Yeah. And, I get it, because you hope in that draft that the Packers have drafted their next cornerback tandem for a decade. And obviously it looks like Jair Alexander, hopefully he's going to be around for that long. Jackson remains to be seen. I think that what you can say through his first 2 games that have been starts, there's been more good than bad. I know there's been some bad sprinkled in there as well. Kevin King, yeah, man, you better get back on the field. I think when he gets back on the field, he'll have his starting gig back. I don't think that'll be a problem. But for 2021, looking ahead, I think you can feel at least okay if you're the Packers about the prospect of having Jackson as a penciled in starter with a draft pick behind him, that if Jackson struggles or doesn't play well, then you have somebody waiting in the wings that way. That's the plan that I would do on something like that. So we're running out of time. Let's get some game picks. Before we do that, I have 2 things that I want to get to. First and foremost, I want to send my biggest thoughts and prayers out to a fan or a friend of mine. She's a Packers fan, big fan of ours. Her name is Pam. She just suffered over the weekend a stroke, and just wanted to let her know we're thinking about you. We're praying for you, Pam. Get well as soon as you can. And my mom, her birthday was yesterday, so she turned 29 again, and she doesn't look a day over it. So thank you to my mom. This all here isn't possible without you. So happy birthday to my mom. And I'll be over for dinner here in the next 20 minutes or so. So look forward to that. Game picks, Jason, tomorrow. I mentioned it. I said it at the beginning. I think you guys know this. Make your layups. I don't think the Packers are better than the Vikings. They've been better than the Vikings all offseason. The only people that thought the Vikings were better than the Packers were the ones that saw the Packers pick a quarterback in the first round. That's it. That was their basis for that. The Vikings stink on both sides in the trenches. The Packers are very good up front on the offensive side of the ball, and they might be getting Bakhtiari back tomorrow. That makes them even better on that side. And on the defensive side of the ball, I think you could see the defensive line and the pass rush specifically starting to kind of come to life a little bit. And Minnesota really they can't block number 55. So if you can't block 55, that's going to make for a long day for your quarterback. So I think Kirk throws the Packers a couple. I think tomorrow might be a return a little bit. We might see a little bit of the D train tooting all over the Packers field, Lambeau Field tomorrow. So I like the Packers tomorrow. I like them 38-20 over the Minnesota Vikings. And I think that a lot of that happens in garbage time. And Jay Swag Daddy is going to be dancing and busting a move for us. He's going to have 2 touchdowns tomorrow. So I like the Packers and I like them relatively big. Jason, how do you feel?
35-14 Packers. And I think one of those touchdowns for Minnesota, they stumble into because something dumb happens and Green Bay does it to themselves. I just don't see where it's going to come from. And I think a lot of that's going to have to do with how much of the game that the Packers are going to have the ball. I think they'll be able to move the ball. And I think Matt LaFleur's strategy is probably pretty simple. You don't want to look ahead, but you do have to turn around and play a road game in 4 days. Probably want to keep your defense as fresh as possible. So the strategy is simple. Keep the ball, chip away, punch it in. Like you said, Jake, make your layups when they get down to the end zone. Punch it into the end zone. Mason Crosby was on the injury report. He will probably play this week, but if you can save his leg and his quad and whatever it is, his back that's bothering him, just punch it in. Just punch it in and don't make Mason have to trot out there more than is necessary. So 35-14, I might be a little bit generous as far as how many points Minnesota scores there, but that's my take. Packers win big.
Yeah, let's just have him kick extra points tomorrow. I like that idea. So producer Kyle is not here because we don't want him on the camera because you guys have seen his pictures. So that makes perfect sense. But producer Kyle, you had a game pick as well. So why don't you throw that up there? Kyle says Packers 32-20. And the reason he said that was because the Packers are going to have 4 touchdowns and 4 2-point conversions because they're not going to have Mason kick at all tomorrow. Crosby will very likely play tomorrow. The Packers did not sign a kicker, as we mentioned in the open. They didn't activate Lazard or Kirksey either, so that could be something to watch now for Thursday. My money is on that you'll see them after the mini bye, looking at, what would that be, November 15th against the Jacksonville Jaguars when they come to Lambeau Field here in, like I said, about 10 days after that San Francisco game. So we're out of time. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you to Eric Thompson for joining us. It's Packers Vikings tomorrow at noon at Lambeau Field. I am Jacob Westendorf, your host. You can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Westendorf. You can follow Jason. He's at Jason Perone. Follow our Twitter at GameOnWI. Thank you to the 3,000 of you, 3,000 plus now, that have chosen to make us part of your day. I mentioned this the other day. A lot of you had some really nice things to say to me earlier in the week, and I'm appreciative of that. Something that I have heard, and it was a concert I was at, actually. Shinedown's lead singer's name is Brent Smith. And he said at the end of a show once, you guys are the audience. You decide who stays and who goes. And I'm very thankful that you guys have allowed us to have an opportunity to stay. So thank you for that. Check us out, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all that stuff, and allow us to stick around even more. So Packers Vikings tomorrow at noon. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next time. Kyle, hit.